I do want to record something really quick, just kind of addressing the seriousness of the corona. Before we make any jokes, I just want to say, I know that a lot of people have died because of this virus, and Rach and I have the utmost respect for people working in the medical field right now. They're literally like soldiers laying their lives on the line to help our families, and we just want to say thank you.
Absolutely. We know many people who work in the medical field, and we are just really grateful for those people and everything that they sacrifice.
Yeah, we raise our glasses to you tonight.
Yes, we do.
I'm Brant.
I'm Rachel.
And this is Hot Cup,
Cold Case,
where we share with you the two things that keep us up at night. And the first is a hot cup of caffeine, and the second is the coronavirus.
I was about to say that too. I was literally going to say that.
No, the second is a cold case. In this episode, Rach has a story for us about a cold case that I know nothing about. And then I'll share a story about a closed case that she knows nothing about. And then we'll end the episode with a short but strange criminal case we like to call a mugshot. Well, I'm sure everyone listening is sick and tired of hearing about the coronavirus. No pun intended. But I feel like we do need to take a moment to document this for those of you who are listening from the far reaches of the future. Like maybe even you, daughter.
Oh, hi, daughter.
So let us tell you a little bit about this viral pandemic and what's going on in our nation right now.
Well, and by the time you hear this, it will have been about 3 weeks, I guess, since we started the quarantine situation.
Toilet paper everywhere is sold out.
Clorox wipes, hand sanitizer, food. I've never seen the grocery store so empty before.
Yeah, I went to the grocery store today, and it looked like a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. The shelves were completely bare. There was quite a few people milling about, but nobody was talking to each other. It was very eerie.
I feel like I have been preparing my whole life for this because I always buy in bulk, and Brant's always like, why did you buy so much? We don't need 45 rolls of toilet paper right now for us 3. You're welcome.
Yeah, luckily we shop at Costco, so we have enough toilet paper to wipe the butts of a small army.
Gross. So gross.
You know, it's times like these that I really wish our country would adopt the bidet system.
Brant has been dreaming about the bidet since he went to South Africa 8 years ago.
I had an experience in South Africa that forever changed my life. And that experience was a bidet.
You're so crazy. Well, that's what we're going to have to start if I can't get toilet paper in the next couple months.
Or I did see some super soakers at the store today, so maybe we could make our own bidet.
That's disgusting.
Or better yet, we could sell them on eBay as portable bidets.
Oh my gosh. That's so gross.
Speaking of eBay, I am looking at a post right now from a guy on eBay who is selling a 24-pack of toilet paper for $100.
That's ridiculous. And I bet someone already bought one from him.
Oh, it says that he's already sold 21.
That's ridiculous. And I'm kind of jealous.
You know, we wouldn't be in this mess if we were on the bidet system. I will get behind any presidential candidate this year that will support a national bidet movement.
Get behind.
Vote for...
No pun intended. You didn't even catch it? I'm usually never quick.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That could be a campaign slogan.
Oh, gosh.
Get behind bidet today.
Oh, my God.
My name is Brant. I've used a bidet, and I approve this message.
Ridiculous. I read an article today that these 2 brothers bought every single bottle of hand sanitizer in their local area. They have 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer.
God.
And they were trying to price gouge on Amazon. So Amazon shut them down. So now they're complaining about what they're going to do with 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer.
Well, I can tell you what I would do. I would donate them to my local hospital and go from 0 to hero.
Oh, God.
So if you haven't listened to our previous episode yet, I asked our Facebook and Instagram followers what are some of the strangest things they've ever smuggled into a movie theater. And I shared some of their responses. But I got one more response after we aired that episode from my cousin, Trent, who, by the way, shares my middle name because he was named after me. But he sent me this message this week. Brant, been waiting for this question my whole life, LOL. When Nana, Tyler, and I went to go see Passion of the Christ in theaters, Nana, no joke, smuggled in a big bucket of KFC chicken, a 3-liter of Shasta orange soda, and a big gallon bag of popcorn. It got even weirder when she started to hand them out during the movie. I mean, come on, there's not a good part in that movie to start passing out chicken, LOL. I'll never forget it. Absolutely hilarious. I can't
even imagine eating during the Passion of the Christ.
I cannot imagine watching Jesus get crucified to the smell of fried chicken.
No. Oh, Nana.
That is horrible, God. Nana.
That literally takes the cake, though.
Trent, you win. Oh, I told our daughter this week that I would teach her how to smuggle candy into a movie. And she thinks the words smuggle and snuggle mean the same thing. So she thinks we're bringing pillows and blankets to the movies.
She's so cute.
I'm ready to hear about a cold case.
And I have one. And I have a good clue this week.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
So I think my clue should be the title of this week's episode.
Oh.
Yes. The Professor in the Library with a Knife.
Oh my God, that's perfect. Is it weird that I'm excited?
It's weird that you just spit across the table at me.
Sorry, I spit when I'm excited.
I literally just wiped your spit off my cheek.
Well, that's why we quarantine ourselves.
Yes, we do.
Because some people spit when they're excited.
Gosh. So this week, I am going to talk to you about the very weird and crazy murder of Betsy Ruth Aardsma. She was born on July 11th, 1947 in Holland, Michigan.
Oh, Holland.
We have several friends that live in Holland. It's right on Lake Michigan. It is incredible. So Betsy was of Dutch ancestry, which Holland, Michigan was settled by Dutch settlers. That's why it's Holland.
Right.
They have a Dutch celebration every year. They have like a big shoe or something. A big wooden shoe.
A clog?
Yeah, but I don't know that's what it's called. What's it called?
Let's ask Alexa. Alexa, what's a Dutch wooden shoe called?
Here's something I found on the web. According to wisegeek.com, Dutch wooden shoes are all wood and also classified as mules since the tops are closed and the backs are open.
Oh, a mule.
A mule. Thank you, Alexa. Alexa knows everything. You know what? I should just ask her how to stop the coronavirus. Alexa, how do we stop the coronavirus?
Here's something I found on Wikipedia. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses that cause diseases in mammals and birds. In humans, the viruses cause respiratory infections.
Well,
I feel like she didn't make that a very big deal. So Betsy was super active, super caring. She was a really, really big part of her church in Holland. She loved community service projects, mission trips, etc. She decided to attend Hope College, which is a private university in Holland, Michigan.
Oh, we've been there.
We have been there, and it's cute. She didn't really like it that much because it was a private university, so it was super restrictive with curfews, what they were allowed to wear, do.
Okay.
So she started there, but decided to transfer to the University of Michigan to get involved with the Peace Corps and continue to study pre-med. So during her time at the university, she did change from pre-med to art and literature. So her senior year at U of M, she started dating David Wright, and both of them graduated in 1969.
So she was literally dating Mr. Wright.
Stop it. So David had to transfer to Hershey, Pennsylvania to go to Penn State. Betsy decided she was going to move to Pennsylvania to be with him. So she attended the art college at Penn State. Now, the medical center was actually in Hershey. Her campus was about an hour to 2 hours away from David. So they wrote a lot, they talked on the phone a lot, but they weren't actually together. This very much confused me when researching this case because she moved to Pennsylvania to be with someone and then really wasn't with them.
Right.
So I don't know if it was because of the distance, but she did do some casual dating in her first semester at Penn State.
Well, it sounds like their relationship wasn't super exclusive.
Yeah, I guess so. Thanksgiving Day, which was November 27th, 1969, she spent the day in Hershey with David and his friends. This was a long weekend for them because of the holiday, and David urged her to stay, but she was really stressed and felt like she needed to get back to her campus to finish a really large project she had. So she decided to have him drive her to the bus station, and she would just go back to her campus. So Friday, November 28th, the next day, she left with her roommate to walk across campus. Now, they parted ways because she needed to go talk to her professor at 4 p.m. and then had actually another meeting with another professor right after that. Now, they needed to go to the library on campus. So the library, it's referred to as the Patty or the Petit.
Pad Thai?
No, not Pad Thai, Brant. Patty or Petit. It's spelled Pattee. We'll just go with Patty, okay? So she needed to work on her projects, study, and kind of get things going. So this was between 4:45 and 4:55 when she was finally in the library after talking with the first professor. At some point while she was in the library, she was seated at a table among the stacks. This library also gets the name the stacks because there are these narrow little aisles and just books everywhere, and it was kind of dark in there, and it just wasn't like a lovely environment. There was a student in the library near the row where Betsy was. She couldn't see Betsy, she could just hear her, and she claimed to have been able to hear a man and a woman conversing, but not like arguing, just quietly talking. Promptly, the same student heard books falling and something hitting the bookshelves that sounded like metal.
Okay.
So it caught the attention of some people, but it still wasn't like super disturbing until a desk clerk, so I guess kind of like the librarian at that time, was yelled at by one or two men. The witness account's a little bit different. One or two men ran by her and out of the building saying, "Somebody better help that girl," as they exited the library.
Okay.
So a few people then found Betsy slumped to the ground, and one girl tried to wake her because she thought she had passed out. A few bystanders rendered first aid and CPR. So first responders were called, and upon arrival, assumed that she maybe had a seizure or something like along those lines. They took her to the health center, which was on campus, and there she was pronounced dead. That's when they realized she had actually been stabbed one single time.
What?
Just one stab wound, believed to be from behind. It went through her left breast with a knife, severing her pulmonary artery and piercing her right ventricle of her heart. So they didn't realize it because there was only like a tiny amount of blood, which was odd, but that blood blended in with the red dress that she was wearing.
Oh my God.
So they couldn't tell until after they had started like chest compressions at the health center, but by that point she was already dead. So no one saw anything, and no one knows anything. The one or two guys that exited the building were considered the best suspects, but no one saw them. No one knows who they are.
Wow.
Crazy. After she had went to the health center, they obviously called the police because they're like, this girl was murdered. So the police came, but when they got to the library, because everyone in the library thought that she had just had a seizure, they started cleaning up the evidence. So they cleaned up the books that had fallen. There was said to be like a trace amount of what looked like urine that they thought maybe had come from her if she had seized.
Right.
So the janitor was mopping it up, cleaned the whole area.
God.
So when the police arrived, they were literally just watching the janitor clean up the last bit of evidence and people just walking in and around the crime scene. So any evidence was destroyed.
It's like the perfect crime.
Yeah,
I mean,
for real.
down to the single precise stab wound.
Yeah, it was crazy. And everyone was surprised. Police investigated and interviewed thousands of men on campus. They even interviewed people in the surrounding areas and even into Holland, Michigan, and they didn't find anything from it. The desk clerk did help a local artist to create a drawing of the man that had yelled at her as he's running out of the building, but it didn't lead to any suspects.
So after talking to all of Betsy's friends and her family, they couldn't come up with any reason why somebody would want to kill her?
Well, if they did, they never let on publicly. So this is one of the most odd parts of this case to me. There are two separate journalists / writers that each were writing and publishing books about Betsy's case. They did not work on this together.
Okay.
Both of them published books incriminating a Penn State grad student for her murder. His name was Richard Hefner.
At this point, I'm thinking either they know something we didn't, or the two men that ran past the librarian were these two writers.
No, these two guys had just done a lot of research on the case.
So they must have found some sort of police record or a statement or something.
I'm not really sure what they did other than just talking and talking and talking and researching and doing interviews and all of those things.
But it is interesting that they both ended up at the same Penn State professor.
Yeah, at the same conclusion.
You said his name was Richard?
Yes.
What a dick.
Brant! God. You just can't help yourself, can you? So Richard was a grad student in geology at the time of Betsy's murder. He was 26 and she was 22, and they had casually dated at the beginning of her semester.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier when I was telling you she had casually dated around, he was one of those guys. So she had actually broken it off with him because she and David were getting more serious. So she ended things with Richard. And at the time of the stabbing, she hadn't even spoken to him for a month or so. So a little backstory on Richard. He had worked at a museum, and he was actually fired at that museum for being accused of touching young boys inappropriately.
Yeah, that's weird.
Right. I don't think charges were ever filed in the museum case, but the museum did fire him. So people that knew Richard said that he never dated anyone other than Betsy. So I think he might have had an infatuation with her.
It's possible.
So cops had actually investigated Richard. They described him as over-prepared. They said it just seemed like he knew the answer to everything that they asked. More in a rehearsed way, not necessarily in an innocent way.
Interesting.
They questioned him about the night of Betsy's murder, and he told police that he was never at the patty because his geology materials were actually stored in another library on campus. In his words, I wouldn't have any reason to go there. So he said he also had an alibi for that night, that he was home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with his parents, which was 2 hours away. The cops questioned and released him many times. So I don't think they ever had anything to hold him on. But later, in one of the books from these authors, there were actually reports from other people that he was not in Lancaster, but he was actually in the dining hall when this murder happened. So it would have placed him on campus, not 2 hours away in Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
And later, his mother would even recant her statement corroborating his alibi.
Really?
So one of the weirdest and most damning things at Penn State is Professor Lauren Wright said that 45 minutes after Betsy was killed, Richard ran over to his house and excitedly said, "Did you hear my ex was murdered?"
What?
Yes. And Professor Wright said it wasn't like this shocked, beside himself excited, but more of an excited, joyful excited.
That is bizarre.
And the professor did tell that to the police. But again, I don't think they had anything to arrest him or even hold him on that.
Right. It's all circumstantial.
So Richard had a checkered life. There's actually reports against him of violence against women, and he could not hold a job at any college, at any place he went to. So in 1975, he's back working for his father's family business. He wanted to be a geologist because his father actually owned a rock shop. That same year, in 1975, 2 boys accused Richard of molesting them while they were employed at his father's rock shop.
More molestation accusations?
Yes. So this one actually went to trial, and there was 1 juror out of 12 that wasn't convinced he was guilty. So that resulted in a hung jury. So he was free to go. And the
Wow.
state never filed charges again because they didn't feel like they had enough to retry him a second time.
Okay.
At this point, most of his family members have died, and even Richard himself died in 2002 from a torn aorta, which I'm not really sure how one could have a torn aorta.
Yeah, I don't know how that happens.
I don't either. So
An
that's-
aorta is in your heart, right? That's a hell of a muscle to pull.
No, your aorta is the main artery of the body that supplies oxygenated blood to your circulatory system. In humans, it does pass over the heart from the left ventricle and runs down the front of the backbone. But anyway, he is not around. So these 2 writers had reached out, separately to different family members because they want to give the other side an opportunity to clear his name. So no one ever wanted to talk to them except Richard's nephew named Chris. So Chris actually worked at the rock shop as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that there was one time that he and Richard were working together and Richard's grandmother had come into the shop. This is when he was out on bail for the molestation charges. Well, the grandma did not know that Chris was there. So she was talking to Richard thinking that they were alone.
Uh-huh.
And she was telling him things like, I've cleaned up your mess so many times and here you are getting in trouble again. And at one point she even said, you killed that girl and now you're killing me.
Oh my God.
Yes. Chris said that after Richard died, he had gone over to his house and was cleaning it out. He said that he found some very disturbing things and found some incriminating evidence that would solidify his guilt in killing Betsy. But he wouldn't tell anyone what it was or talk about it. He said that Chris had a very troubled past and he wanted him to be able to find rest in the afterlife.
Oh my God.
There was never any charges filed. We might have our answer. It seems like a really good case against Richard, but he died, so no one can try him now. But he could still be innocent. No one knows.
But the circumstantial evidence against him is quite compelling.
Right.
What an odd place for a murder. In the middle of a quiet library, surrounded by people. You said there was a report of 1 or 2 men exiting the library, yelling, somebody better help that girl. I wonder if the attacker, having only stabbed Betsy once, was only intending to wound her, which is why he stabbed her from behind so she wouldn't see him, and found out later that he had killed her. And that might also explain why Richard shows up at his friend's house excitedly talking about his ex that just died.
But why would you want to wound someone, especially if there was no one else around?
Maybe they wounded you, a jilted lover, perhaps.
I don't know.
Yikes.
I know. So there is my sad cold case of Betsy Aardsma.
Well, the case that I'm going to share with you tonight is officially closed, but some people believe it shouldn't be, and that powerful people actually conspired to frame an innocent man who threatened to expose them.
What?
Yeah. Buckle up, Buttercup, because this is the case of the Kosevo monster. On November 16th, 2004.
It's my birthday.
I know. How old were you?
Brant, I can't do math like that.
It's okay. You're good at other things, babe.
15? Yeah, 15.
Well, when you were 15, 64-year-old Mitra Semjanaska went missing from her apartment in Kisevo, Macedonia. And when investigators arrived at her residence, they found no signs of forced entry or any kind of violent struggle. A couple months later, on January 12th, 2005, just outside of Kisevo, a scrap collector was wandering through a construction project for a new sports center in town when he came across a hole containing what appeared to be a human body wrapped in plastic.
Wow.
Police soon arrived on the scene, where they discovered the bag contained the naked body of Mitra Semjanaska.
Oh.
She was bound with a telephone cord, and an autopsy later confirmed that she had been raped and strangled.
Ugh.
A journalist in Kisevo named Vlado Taneski, who wrote articles for New Macedonia, which is the nation's largest daily publication, he decided to publish a story about Semjanaska's murder, and soon everyone in town was talking about it. The grisly murder had many people worried that the killer was still around. Police eventually narrowed down their list of suspects to 2 men, Ante Risteski and Igor Mirkeski.
Those rhyme.
They do. Both men were already charged with the murder of an elderly man named Radoslav Bozanovsky,
Good job.
whom they had tortured and killed in much the same way Mitra Semjanaska had been murdered. So police tied them to the murder because of the similarities between the two.
Right.
Taneski, the reporter for New Macedonia, followed the trial, during which the prosecution presented confessions from both Risteski and Mirkeski.
There's a lot of Eskies going on right now.
You're right.
This is very confusing.
Let's call the reporter Taneski, because that's
Okay.
his name, and the other two, we'll just call them the 2 Eskies.
The 2 Eskies.
The 2
Okay.
other Eskies.
Okay.
So during the trial, the prosecution presented confessions from the 2 Eskies
Okay.
that they had, in fact, murdered the elderly man, Bozanovsky.
Oh my god. Another ski. Good lord.
But both men vehemently denied any involvement in the murder of Mitra Semjanaska. But, in spite of their testimony, the 2 Eskies were eventually found guilty for both murders and sentenced to prison.
Okay.
So a year went by, and the people of Kisevo felt a little safer with these 2 convicted men now behind bars.
Right.
But then, another local woman mysteriously vanished. On November 10th, 2007, 56-year-old Ljubika Lakoska suddenly went missing from her home. Once again, investigators found no signs of forced entry or violent struggle at her residence.
Okay.
A couple months later, on February 3rd of 2008, a truck driver at a roadside rest stop in the mountains of North Kisevo noticed something sticking out of a garbage pile at the bottom of a nearby ravine.
Oh no.
As he got closer, he realized it was a human hand.
No.
Police were immediately called to the scene, where they uncovered the naked body of Ljubika Lakoska.
Oh no.
And just like Mitra Semjanaska, her body was bound with a telephone cord and wrapped in a plastic bag. There were also signs of rape and strangulation.
That's crazy.
According to the coroner, Lakoska had died only days before her body was discovered, meaning for the past few months that she was missing, she may have been held captive by her killer.
No.
Yeah. In an article for the New Macedonia, Taneski, that reporter, wrote that Lakoska had been abducted while out to buy groceries. When police read Taneski's report, they were curious where he'd gotten this information.
Oh no.
But neither the police nor Taneski's fellow journalists were ever able to track down his source. Taneski went on to become a 3-time winner of the National Award for Best Reporting. And then a few months later, a woman in Kisevo, Macedonia, is standing outside a local kindergarten when her cell phone begins to ring. She pauses for a moment and then realizes it's not her cell phone that's ringing. The sound is coming from the nearby grass.
Oh no.
So she spots a phone in the grass, and thinking that someone must have dropped it by mistake and is now calling it to track it down, she picks up the phone and answers it. The caller asks, "Who are you?" and she explained how she found the phone.
Right.
And that's when the caller informed her to wait right there because the police were on their way.
What?
What the woman soon learned when the police arrived is that the phone she found in the grass belonged to another woman who had recently gone missing.
Oh, no.
On May 7th, 2008, 65-year-old Zivana Temolkoska went missing.
So these are all older women.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a pattern with the last name? All the last names of these victims are Scuzz.
You're right, they are.
This is insane. You didn't notice that?
No.
Man, I am such a detective. I think this is part of the MO.
Maybe. And a few days after she went missing, on Friday, May 16th, 2008, Temolkoska's naked body was found in a city dump near a Kisevo football stadium. Just like Semjonoska and Lakoska, she appeared to have been raped and strangled before being bound with a telephone cord and wrapped in a transparent nylon bag. According to the autopsy, she had most likely been killed the same day she disappeared. And she had sustained 13 wounds to her skull and 5 broken ribs.
That's crazy.
In one of his newspaper articles, Taneski suggested that the recent string of murders was most likely the work of a serial killer living among the people of Kisevo.
Right.
He wrote, quote, "The people of Kisevo are living in fear and panic after another butchered body of a woman from town was found over the weekend. The local police, as well as the town populace, see the mysterious disappearances and terrible deaths of Zivana Temolkoska and Lubika Lakoska as the work of a single person, a serial killer." And Macedonian police were beginning to suspect the same thing. In addition to the grisly similarities between the murders, all the abductions had been carried out without any sign of forced entry or struggle, which also suggested a high level of planning. And as investigators began looking into the backgrounds of the 3 recent murder victims, they discovered another odd similarity between them. All 3 women had at one time worked as a cleaner, which may or may not be the reason they had been targeted. But what puzzled investigators most was where each of the victims were found.
Oh, no.
Each one of the bodies had been left in illegal dumping grounds, unlikely to conceal them for long.
Right.
So police spokesperson Ivo Katevsky, another ski,
Oh my gosh.
said, we'll call him Ivo.
Okay, great.
He said, quote, "Whether it was 3 weeks or 3 years after they were murdered, the killer wanted the bodies to be found." End quote. But if these murders were the work of a serial killer, then the 2 skis I mentioned earlier who were in prison
Right.
must
they couldn't have done it.
as they were in prison when the murder of the other victims occurred.
Right.
So the 2 skis, as you remember, had always maintained they had nothing to do with the death of Mitra Semjonoska, and the people of Kisevo began to suspect that they may have been telling the truth, which means the killer was still among them.
I've seen this in other cases where someone is accused of multiple crimes and they will confess to some, but adamantly say that they're innocent for another. And I always thought that was so interesting. So maybe they weren't responsible for it.
So a local judge ordered a judicial review of the case against the 2 skis in prison.
Okay.
And the new investigation uncovered vital evidence that had been suppressed during the 2 men's trial.
Great.
It was a forensic report that showed neither one of the skis' DNA profiles matched the DNA recovered from Mitra Semjonoska's body.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So a few days later, on May 19th of 2008, Vlado Taneski published another article in the New Macedonian newspaper that read as follows, quote, "The massacred body of Zivana Temolkoska was found on Friday on a dump close to the football stadium in Kisevo. The body was wrapped in a transparent nylon bag and tied with a telephone cable, which was probably used to strangle the poor woman. The corpse was given to forensic examiners who determined that Temolkoska was severely beaten, mutilated, and then strangled. According to the autopsy, she was killed on the same day she disappeared." End quote. And that's when local investigators noticed something strange in the newspaper report. Taneski had stated that the telephone cable used to bind each of the victims had also been used to strangle them, which was something police had always suspected, but a detail they had never actually released to the public.
I knew it.
And then, unlike any other local journalists, Taneski even went so far as to state the type of phone cord the killer had used.
What?
Another detail they had not released to the public. Evo, the police spokesman, said, quote, "We read Taneski's stories, and it made us suspicious. He knew too much."
Right.
End quote. So detectives conducted a detailed investigation over the next several weeks, and after all the psychological profiling, forensic analysis, DNA testing, and interviews with hundreds of men, investigators and their colleagues from the violent crime unit in the Macedonian capital believed they had finally tracked down the Kosovo monster. And somewhere around 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in June, dozens of police officers surrounded Taneski's house in a quiet residential suburb of Kosovo. He was apprehended without a fight and brought to the local police station for questioning. Although he didn't request a lawyer, Evo said that Taneski refused to answer any of the detectives' questions. He simply kept repeating, quote, "I don't know, I don't remember," end quote. Which, at that point, just lawyer up.
Right.
So police obtained a search warrant for Taneski's home, where they discovered a rather large collection of pornographic materials. They also collected a sample of Taneski's DNA, which they then compared with traces of semen found on one of the victims. The next day, detectives received the results of the DNA analysis.
It's a match.
It was a match. And the 56-year-old crime reporter and family man was charged with the murders of all 3 Kosovo women, the same murders he had been reporting on for years.
That is ridiculous.
Investigators began looking into Taneski's background and soon discovered that he had been writing for local newspapers in his hometown of Kosovo for the past 20 years. And he had lived his entire life in the same house where he was arrested.
Oh, wow.
He and his wife, Vesna, had met at a poetry reading in 1973 and had been married for the past 31 years. And together they had 2 grown sons. Vesna had qualified as the first female lawyer in town.
That's crazy.
And their eldest son, Svanko, was a leading academic linguist in Slovakia.
Wait, hold on. His wife is a lawyer and he didn't ask for a lawyer?
Yeah, that's weird, right?
That's very weird. Like, what a dumb move.
Yeah, maybe he didn't have a whole lot of confidence in her lawyering skills.
That is ridiculous.
And his second son, Igor, was serving as a doctor in the Macedonian army. So Vesna, his wife, described her 31 years with Taneski as, quote, "a perfect marriage. Many envied us. I was happy with him. This all seems like a horrible dream." And she said that her husband was, quote, "always quiet and gentle. The only time I ever saw him get aggressive was when we were living with his parents," end quote.
I'd get aggressive if I was living with your parents, too.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.
Living with your parents will definitely bring that out of you. Some of Taneski's colleagues from the local newspaper described him as, quote, "unbelievably low-key and soft-natured." Others said, quote, "he was a nice and educated guy who seemed completely normal." One crime reporter at the New Macedonia, named Ognen Kansarovec, said he had worked alongside Taneski to write some of the paper's stories on the Kosovo monster. Kansarovec said Taneski, quote, "was so calm when he was discussing the murders. When the police rang me to say, 'Your reporter is the murderer,' I could barely believe my ears," end quote.
Is it like a split personality thing?
Maybe. Taneski was accused of abducting, raping, and strangling his victims with a phone cord before wrapping their bodies in plastic and leaving them around Kosovo. Police also learned that all 3 of the murdered Kosovo women lived in Taneski's neighborhood. And Taneski would often discuss the murder with his victims' families.
What?
One of his victims' sons, Zoran Temolkoski, said, quote, "You can't describe the feeling. It was very hard on me to have someone kill your mother and then come to your house to say hi,"
Oh
It's
my God.
horrifying. End quote.
Oh my gosh.
Investigators believe that Taneski's occupation may also explain why all the women had been abducted without any signs of forced entry or struggle. Ivo said it would have been easy for him as a journalist to make contact with these women and gain entry into their home.
Makes me so mad.
And if Taneski was the Kosovo monster, it may also explain why he couldn't account for the source of a claim he published that one of the victims had been lured into a car by two men.
Right, absolutely.
Ivo said, quote, "It looks to me as if Taneski wanted to divert the police investigation away from him by including unattributed sources and stories." Antony Novotny, a professor who leads the psychiatric clinic in the Macedonian capital, said, quote, "This is pure speculation, as Taneski was never my patient, but one explanation could be that he wanted to be caught by letting slip what he did in his articles. Perhaps he saw it as a way of resolving his inner problems and getting rid of the burden which came with killing these women." End quote. Furthermore, remember how investigators had discovered that all the Kosovo monster's victims had backgrounds as cleaners?
Yes.
Well, they soon discovered that Taneski's deceased mother had also held a job as a cleaner, and that all three murder victims bore a striking resemblance to her.
Oh, that's weird.
Taneski is rumored to have had a troubled relationship with his mother, one which worsened considerably after his father killed himself in 1990.
Oh.
One of the victims' bodies had even been wrapped in a green polka-dotted dressing gown, very similar to the kind Taneski's mother wore.
That's weird.
Yeah. But Taneski's wife, Vesna, said those claims are entirely false. She said, quote, "The state institutions and a great deal of the public have lynched a man who is innocent, whose guilt is yet to be proven."
His DNA matched.
Well, maybe that's the lawyer in her talking. But she was also married to him for 31 years, and she defended him to the end. But remember, this is coming from a woman who said the only time she ever saw him get violent was with his own mother. So
Yeah.
Vlado Taneski went before a judge the day after he was arrested and was ordered to be held in custody for 30 days. That evening, he was transferred to a prison in Tetovo, a town 70 kilometers north of Kosovo, and he arrived there at 8:40 p.m. Normally, the severity of Taneski's charges would have earned him a cell in solitary confinement.
Uh-oh.
But because of overcrowding, the prison could not give him a cell to himself.
Uh-oh.
So Taneski was housed with 3 other inmates. 2 of his cellmates, 22-year-old Nusret Ademi and 28-year-old Albert Ilgizi, were accused of irregularities, air quotes, surrounding the parliamentary elections at the beginning of June.
What does that mean?
Some kind of white-collar crime.
Okay.
And his third cellmate, 49-year-old Izar Farzi, was facing trial for the poisoning and murder of a 14-year-old girl.
Oh, gosh.
At 1:50 a.m. the next morning, one of the inmates raised an alarm that brought prison guards running to Taneski's cell. And what they found was Taneski's body lying in the cell's bathroom, where he appeared to have drowned himself in a small, dirty bucket of water.
That's weird. I don't buy that for a minute.
So less than 30 hours after entering Tetovo prison, Vlado Taneski was pronounced dead. And according to prison officials, Taneski's cellmates later explained that they had been asleep during the suicide.
Of course.
And didn't hear a thing.
Of course.
Some people have questioned whether or not Taneski was murdered by his cellmates, but 2 handwritten suicide notes were found that graphologists later confirmed did seem to be written by Taneski himself. One note on his body directed authorities to a second, which he had hidden under a pillow on his bed. And it read, quote, "I am proud of my family, and I love them very much. I have not done any of the things I am accused of. I did not commit these murders."
That's
End
weird.
quote. Vesna Taneski, his wife, said she had talked to her husband before he had been transferred from the Kosovo jail. She said, quote, "I told him that we had been married for a long time, had been through good and bad together, and that I wanted him to tell me the truth about the crimes he was being accused of. I told him I would forgive him for anything that he'd done and that I just wanted to know who I had lived with for 31 years.
Oh, man.
She said, then he looked at me straight in the eyes and said, I haven't done anything or killed anyone. And one day everything will come to light. End
Okay.
quote. She said those were his last words to her. So there are some theories that Taneski was framed for the Kosevo murders. Vesna said her husband's reporting, quote, did not spare anyone in power, authority, or influence, or anyone who is guilty of crime or corruption. At one time, I was told that if my husband continued to write about a certain company in the way he had, harm would come to my family, and that my children would be killed.
Oh, okay.
His courage actually scared me. End quote.
I don't know. That's so crazy.
It's weird that it's coming from a woman who was married to him for so long.
I know, but we both have read and researched cases before of women not believing their spouse could do something. All evidence points to the fact that they did.
So she really believed he was innocent. But Ivo says that DNA evidence brought against Taneski showed he was a 100% match to the killer.
You can't get around DNA evidence like that.
Yeah. Ivo said, quote, all these women were raped, molested, and murdered in the most terrible way. And we have very strong evidence that Taneski was responsible for all three. End quote. He went on to say that prior to Taneski's apparent suicide, investigators were actually planning on charging him with a fourth murder.
I was going to ask you that, if there were any murders that he could be linked to, because he's had the same job and lived in the same area practically his whole life.
Yeah, a 78-year-old, Gorka Pavelska, another Ska, had gone missing from her home in May 30th of 2003. And once again, there was no sign of forced entry, but her body was never found. And Ivo said, quote, we believe Taneski was involved in that case too.
That's crazy.
So since criminal law in Macedonia does not allow for the prosecution of a deceased person, all three Kosevo women's murders have been officially closed. And that is the story of the Kosevo monster. So his wife is convinced that he's innocent. And many of his colleagues still can't believe that someone with his temperament could do something like that. But the DNA evidence was a 100% match. Plus, the circumstantial evidence is all there. All three women were his neighbors. They all looked like his mother, whom he seemed to have an issue with. One of them was even dressed like her.
It definitely is weird.
He had details that no other journalist had. It caused him to win awards. So he was actually getting accolades for the reporting he was doing on his own murders.
I feel so sorry for those women and their families. I just can't even imagine being interviewed by the person that killed my mother.
Yeah, it's scary.
Ugh. Well, I have a silly mugshot to bring you tonight.
Good. I need a silly mugshot after this week of global pandemic and panic.
I know, seriously. So, 2 teenage thieves burgled a woman's Florida home and stole an urn containing the remains of her father, as well as a separate urn containing her 2 deceased dogs.
That's a really weird thing to steal.
Absolutely. The 2 thieves thought the urns contained, wait for it, heroin.
Oh, no.
Yes.
No.
Apparently, the thieves wholeheartedly believed it was heroin because they actually snorted it.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Yes. The 2 burglars wanted to actually return the ashes after they saw on the news that night that a woman's house was broken into and the remains of her family members were stolen. However, they were discouraged by another friend who told them, you're going to get caught, don't do that. They were later caught the same week after attempting to burgle another home.
See, that's when I would have just stopped being a thief. I would have turned to my friend and said, we're not good at this. We just need to stop while we're ahead.
Who goes into someone's house and sees these beautifully decorated urns and thinks to themselves, that must be the place they're hiding their heroine?
That's where I'd keep my heroine if I lived here.
I mean, dear God, like, I just don't understand.
And I don't know what's worse, finding out that Grandpa's ashes were stolen or that these guys snorted Grandpa.
Brant.
Isn't that horrible?
Like, what is wrong with people? You have to be, like, seriously desperate for a drug fix to do that.
If those were my ashes, I would haunt those guys.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, just a reminder, we love reading your stories about some of your most frightening experiences. So if you have a story that we could share on the podcast, please send it to us at hotcupcoldcasepodcast@gmail.com. And even if you don't have a story, please share the podcast with your friends and encourage them to listen. The more listeners we have, the more stories we can collect and share with you.
And also, if you're enjoying the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and other streaming services. The more 5-star ratings and reviews we receive, the easier it becomes for more people to find us in their podcast directories. And finally, for even more things to keep you up at night, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hot Cup Cold Case Podcast. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Hot Cup Cold Case is written and produced by myself and Brant with music by Young Kool-Aid.
If you ever need your mug filled
or your spine chilled,
this is Hot Cup
Cold Case.
Hold on, our daughter just woke up. Hi, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi.
Are you in our tent?
I'm talking to everyone.
You're talking to everyone?
I can't hear me.
Oh, you can't hear anyone?
No.
Oh, we can't hear them, but they can hear us.
What are you doing?
They're listening to our podcast. Is there anything you want to say to your future self?
Did you know that a french fry can go down to your belly and then the poo comes out?